I guess I should start by introducing myself. I'm Tracy, and at 28, I've already lived through enough family drama to last a lifetime. My early childhood memories are pretty hazy, but I remember bits and pieces from when my dad was still alive. I was only 5 when he passed away, and honestly, his face in my memories gets blurrier every year. Mom didn't waste much time moving on. Within a year, she had remarried, and a year after that, my half-sister Emma was born. Don't get me wrong, my stepfather was actually a decent guy. He treated me well enough during the 10 years he was around. But when I was 15, he and Mom split up. That's when things really started changing. Mom didn't need to work because the alimony was good, but she developed this nasty habit of reminding me constantly that my own father had left us nothing, while my stepfather's money was keeping me fed and clothed. What Mom didn't know was that I knew the truth about our house. It had belonged to my dad's parents, and when I turned 18, my grandfather, rest his soul, transferred the deed to my name. I'll never forget that evening when Mom cornered me about it. "Tracy, what are you planning to do with the house?" she demanded, her eyes fixed on me like a hawk. I remember being genuinely confused. "Nothing, you and Emma can keep living here like always." The way her face instantly softened and how quickly she hugged me, I should have seen it as the manipulation it was. But I was young and still desperate for her approval. I worked my ass off in school, earned a full scholarship to college, and landed an internship through pure determination. Unlike my sister Emma, who's now 21 and treats college like an inconvenience, I understood the value of education. Maybe that's because I had to earn everything myself, while I ended up paying for her education when she turned 18. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm the one funding my sister's college education. Mom somehow convinced me it was my duty when Emma graduated high school. "You can afford it now," she said, making it sound like I owed it to them. I agreed to pay for a public college, even though Emma wanted some fancy private school. Looking back, I should have seen it as the first red flag of many to come. It was just another Tuesday when everything started unraveling. I'd gone to Mom's house, technically my house, but I never bring that up, for our usual family dinner. I was barely through the door when Emma burst in behind me, practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," she was jumping around like a kid on Christmas morning. "Emma, what the hell?" I tried to get her attention, but she just kept squealing and dancing around the living room. Finally, after what felt like forever, she calmed down enough to blurt out, "Jake proposed. I'm getting married." Jake was our neighbor, a decent guy I'd known for years. My heart did this weird little twist. I'd recently caught my boyfriend cheating and had to end things, so wedding news wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear. But I plastered on my best big sister smile. Wow, Emma, congratulations. But aren't you still in the middle of college?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Who cares about college? This is way more important." "Emma, education is," I started, but Mom cut me off. "Oh, honey, this is wonderful news," Mom jumped in, completely ignoring my concerns. "We need to start planning immediately. Should we book the country club? Or maybe that new venue downtown?" I sat there watching them bounce ideas back and forth, getting more elaborate and expensive by the minute. The familiar feeling of being the only adult in the room started creeping in. "We'll need at least 200 guests," Emma was saying. "And white doves. Lots of them. Don't forget about the ice sculpture," Mom added, like it was as essential as having a minister. I couldn't take it anymore. "I should head home," I said, standing up. "I've got work tomorrow." Neither of them really noticed me leaving. They were too busy planning what was already sounding like the wedding of the century. As I drove back to my apartment, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling in my gut. Something told me this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. A week passed after Emma's big announcement, and I was starting to think maybe I'd been paranoid about the whole thing. Then my phone rang. It was Mom, and her voice had that tone, you know, the one parents use when they're about to ask for something big. "Tracy, honey, can you come over? We need to have a serious talk." When I arrived, Emma was already there, practically vibrating with excitement. She had this huge binder full of magazine cutouts and what looked like a novel's worth of notes. Before I could even sit down, she launched into her grand vision. "So I planned everything out perfectly," she gushed, flipping through pages of what looked like very expensive ideas. "The venue I want has this amazing garden with a fountain, and they do this thing where they release hundreds of white doves right after the ceremony." I tried to keep my face neutral, but my stomach was already doing flips. "That sounds expensive." "Oh, well, about that." Emma pulled out a piece of paper covered in numbers. "I did all the calculations." When she handed me that paper, I swear my heart stopped for a second. The numbers I was looking at weren't just expensive, they were insane. The venue alone cost more than my annual rent. Then there were the doves, a live band, not just any band, but some supposedly famous one, ice sculptures, designer dress, premium open bar, gourmet catering. "Are you joking?" I couldn't help asking, my voice coming out higher than usual. Emma snatched the paper back, scanning it like she was checking her math. "No, why would I be joking? Everything's perfectly reasonable." "Reasonable?" I choked out. "Emma, this is more than what some people spend on a house down payment." That's when the waterworks started. Emma's face crumpled, and she burst into tears. "You're just jealous, because your boyfriend cheated on you, and now you're alone." "Tracy," Mom snapped, but not at her, at me. "How dare you upset your sister like this?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Look, I've been helping you a lot already. I'm paying for your college, your living expenses, buying your clothes." "Oh, here we go," Mom interrupted, her face turning red. "You're going to throw all that in her face now?" "That's what family does, Tracy. We help each other. You're just fulfilling your duties as a big sister." I stood up, my hands shaking. "I'm leaving, this is ridiculous." "Fine," Emma screamed after me as I headed for the door. "I'll ask Daddy for the money instead. And don't expect an invitation to the wedding, since you're too selfish to help." I slammed the door behind me, but not before hearing Mom consoling Emma, "Don't worry, sweetie. Your sister has always been difficult. We'll figure something out." The next 2 weeks were blissfully quiet. No calls from Mom, no texts from Emma, no guilt trips or manipulation attempts. I actually got to focus on my work and enjoy some peace for once. But like all good things in my life, it didn't last. My phone rang one afternoon, and I was surprised to see my stepfather's name on the screen. We hadn't talked in a while, though we'd always maintained a decent relationship after his divorce from Mom. "Tracy, got a minute?" He sounded tired. "Sure, what's up?" "Your mother and Emma came to see me," he said, and I could hear him sighing. "They showed me this wedding budget." I couldn't help but laugh. "Let me guess, they want you to pay for the extravaganza?" They did, until I saw those numbers. "Tracy, what the hell are they thinking? Emma's never worked a day in her life, she's still in college, which you're paying for, by the way, and she wants a wedding that costs more than my first house?" "They tried to get me to pay for it first," I explained. When I refused, Emma threw a tantrum and said she'd ask you instead. He chuckled, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Well, I told them absolutely not. Emma may be my daughter, but I'm not going to encourage this entitled behavior. She needs to learn the value of money." We talked for a while longer, sharing our frustrations about the situation. It felt good to know I wasn't the only one who thought this was all insane. But the peace didn't last long. A week later, Mom and Emma showed up at my apartment unannounced. They didn't mention their failed attempt to get money from my stepfather. Instead, they came armed with a new budget, still ridiculous, but less astronomical than the first one. "See," Emma said, shoving the paper at me. "We cut everything down, now you can help." I looked at the numbers. They'd removed the doves and the famous band, but it was still way more than I could afford. "Emma, I still can't pay for this." "You could take out a loan," she said, like it was the most obvious solution in the world. I stared at her, waiting for her to say she was joking. She wasn't. My baby sister was seriously suggesting I go into debt for her wedding. That's actually a great idea, Mom chimed in, beaming like Emma had just solved world hunger. The payments wouldn't be too bad if you spread them out over a few years. That was my breaking point. I stood up, walked to my front door, and held it open. Get out, both of you. I'm not taking out a loan for your wedding, I'm not paying for any of it. End of discussion. You selfish scum, Emma spat, gathering her things. I hope you die alone. Mom gave me one of her patented disappointed looks as they left. I really thought I raised you better than this, Tracy. I closed the door behind them and slid down to the floor, my head in my hands. Somehow, I knew this wasn't over. With my family, it never is. A month passed, and life went on. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about the whole wedding drama. Then came my Aunt Sarah's birthday, my dad's sister, one of the few connections I still had to his side of the family. I couldn't skip it, even though I knew Mom and Emma would be there. The party was at Aunt Sarah's house, a cozy place filled with family photos, including several of my dad. I always loved looking at them, trying to piece together more memories of him. When I arrived, the tension in the room was instant. Mom and Emma were already there, huddled in a corner, whispering and shooting daggers at me with their eyes. I ignored them and went straight to Aunt Sarah. Happy birthday, I hugged her tight, grateful for at least one normal family relationship. Tracy, sweetheart, she held me close and whispered, I heard about everything. Are you okay? I just nodded and handed her my gift. The next hour was awkward, but manageable. I caught up with cousins I hadn't seen in a while, carefully navigating the room to avoid Mom and Emma. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells, clearly aware of the family drama, but trying to maintain the celebration's cheerful facade. Then came time for the toasts. My stomach dropped when Mom stood up, glass in hand. She had that look on her face, the one that meant trouble. I'd like to say something, Mom started, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Sarah, you're such a wonderful sister-in-law, always supporting family. Unlike some people here, you understand the importance of helping your loved ones. The room got quiet, too quiet. You know, it breaks my heart to see how some children turn out, Mom continued, staring directly at me. When you raise them, sacrifice everything for them, and they grow up to be selfish, ungrateful. That was it, I'd had enough. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped loudly against the floor. Stop right there, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite my shaking hands. You want to talk about being ungrateful? Let's talk about how you've been living in my house. Yes, everyone, my house, the one my grandfather left to me, not you. Let's talk about how I've been paying for Emma's college, her clothes, her expenses, while you guilt-trip me about not taking out a loan for her ridiculous wedding. The room was dead silent. Emma started crying, right on cue. How dare you? Mom's face was red with rage. I gave birth to you, I raised you, and this is how you repay me. You're nothing but a worthless greedy. Enough, I shouted, surprising even myself. You want greedy? Fine, I'll show you greedy. Get out of my house. You have 2 weeks to move out. Mom turned pale. You can't be serious. Oh, I am. 2 weeks, after that, I'm getting lawyers involved. The relatives were staring, open-mouthed. Emma was sobbing harder now, but for once, I didn't care. I turned to Aunt Sarah, who looked sad but understanding. I'm sorry about ruining your birthday, I said, hugging her goodbye. I'll call you later. As I walked out, I heard Mom screaming behind me, but I didn't look back. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get my car key in the ignition, but once I did, I drove straight home and poured myself a very large glass of wine. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages and missed calls from Mom. I read the first few. Tracy, please, you can't do this to us. I didn't mean what I said. Where are we supposed to go? You're being ridiculous. I blocked her number. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. Over the next few days, every relative I had started calling me. Some were diplomatic, others were downright hostile. My cousin Mark's call was typical. "Look, Tracy, I get that you're upset, but you can't throw your own mother out on the street." "Watch me," I replied, then hung up. Aunt Linda tried a different approach. "Sweetie, your mother's not perfect, but she's still your mother. Think about what your father would want." That one hurt, but I stood firm. Dad would want his daughter to stop being manipulated and used. "And don't bring him into this, none of you bothered to tell me the truth about the house all those years ago." I finally decided to get professional help. The lawyer I hired, Mr. Reynolds, was refreshingly straightforward. "Here's the situation," he explained, spreading out documents on his desk. "You're the legal owner of the house. You've been paying all taxes and bills. Your mother could try to claim tenant rights due to long-term residency, but given that you've been maintaining the property and she's had free residence, any judge would likely side with you." "What's my next step?" I asked. "We'll serve her with a formal eviction notice." 2 weeks is actually generous, you're well within your rights here. I had him draw up all the necessary paperwork. When the 2 weeks were almost up, I went to the house with him, not wanting to face Mom alone. The scene we found was exactly what I expected. Mom was crying, Emma was yelling, and boxes were scattered everywhere. "This is illegal," Mom screamed when she saw my lawyer. "I'll sue you, Tracy. I'll take everything you have." Mr. Reynolds stayed perfectly calm. "Mrs. Johnson, you're welcome to pursue legal action, but I should warn you that you'd likely lose, and the court costs would be substantial." "How can you do this to your own mother?" Emma demanded, getting in my face. "Where are we supposed to live?" "That's not my problem anymore," I said, surprising myself with how little I felt. "You have until tomorrow evening. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." Mom tried a different tactic, her voice suddenly soft and pleading. "Tracy, honey, please. I'm sorry about what I said at the party, I was upset. You know I didn't mean it. But I'd heard it all before. The guilt trips, the manipulation, the fake apologies, I was done with all of it. Mr. Reynolds will oversee the final move out tomorrow," I said, turning to leave. "I don't want to see either of you again." Later, I heard through Aunt Sarah that Mom and Emma had moved in with Emma and her fiancé, Jake. Apparently, the grand wedding plans were now on hold due to lack of funds. Mom was telling everyone who would listen about her cruel, heartless daughter who threw her own family out on the street. But here's the thing, for the first time in my life, I didn't care what she was saying about me. It's been 3 months since I evicted Mom and Emma. The house sits empty now, I can't bring myself to sell it or rent it out yet. Sometimes I drive by, remembering the good times before everything went wrong. Before Mom's manipulation became obvious, before Emma turned into an entitled princess, before I realized how much of my life I'd spent trying to please people who saw me as nothing but a walking ATM. Last week, Aunt Sarah invited me over for coffee. She's been my rock through all of this, the only one who's consistently supported my decision. "How are you really doing?" she asked, setting down a plate of those chocolate cookies she knows I love. "Honestly? Better than I expected." I wrapped my hands around the warm coffee mug. "But there's something I haven't told anyone yet." She waited patiently while I gathered my thoughts. "I've been seeing a therapist," I admitted. "Dr. Martinez. She's been helping me understand a lot about my relationship with Mom and Emma. About how Mom's been manipulating me since Dad died, using grief and guilt to control me." Aunt Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Your dad would be proud of you, you know. He was the most honest, straightforward person I knew. He wouldn't have wanted you to be used and manipulated, even by family. Especially by family." She got up and went to her bookshelf, pulling out an old photo album. "I've been meaning to give you this. These are pictures of your dad from before you were born, through your early years." We spent the next hour going through the album. There were photos I'd never seen before, Dad in college, Dad at his first job, Dad holding me as a baby. In every picture, he had the same kind, genuine smile. Your mother, Aunt Sarah hesitated. She changed after he died. I tried to stay close, to be there for you, but she made it difficult. When she married your stepfather so quickly, we were all concerned. But she shut us out, said we were interfering. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Rachel. FYI, Emma's wedding is officially cancelled. Jake called it off. Aunt Sarah saw my expression change. What is it? I showed her the text. I should feel bad, right? But honestly, I'm relieved. Jake's a good guy. He deserves better than getting sucked into this mess. Have you heard anything else about them? I shook my head. Just what people tell me. They're still living with Jake, or were, I guess. Mom's been working full-time now, first time in 20 years. Emma dropped out of college. Are you going to stop paying her tuition? Already did, sent a formal letter through my lawyer explaining that all financial support would end. Got a hysterical voice message from Mom about how I was ruining Emma's future. Blocked that number too. Aunt Sarah poured more coffee. You know they're telling everyone who'll listen that you're the villain in this story. I actually laughed. Let them. I'm done caring what they think, done feeling guilty for having boundaries, done being the family ATM. A week after my visit with Aunt Sarah, I was working late at the office when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. It was Jake. Tracy, please don't hang up, he sounded exhausted. I need to talk to you. If this is about the wedding. It's not, well, not directly. I called off the engagement. I sat back in my chair. I heard, I'm sorry, Jake. He gave a hollow laugh. Don't be, I should thank you, actually. Watching how Emma and your mom treated you, how they acted about the wedding, it opened my eyes. Emma's not the person I thought she was. What happened? After you evicted them, they moved in with me. At first, I felt bad for them. But then I started noticing things. They never offered to contribute to bills. Emma wouldn't look for work, said she was too stressed about the wedding. Your mom kept talking about how you'd come around eventually, how you'd feel guilty, and give them money. I closed my eyes, feeling a migraine coming on. Classic mom. Yeah. The final straw was when I found them going through my personal papers. They were looking for information about my savings, my investments. They wanted to know how much they could get me to spend on the wedding. His voice hardened. I confronted Emma about it. Want to know what she said? I can guess. She said I was being selfish, just like you. That if I really loved her, I'd want to give her the wedding of her dreams. That's when I knew I had to end it. After I hung up with Jake, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. My phone buzzed again, another text from Rachel. Mom and Emma got kicked out of Jake's place. They're staying with Grandma now. Emma's telling everyone Jake cheated on her. Mom's saying you turned him against her. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started looking at real estate listings. Maybe it was time to sell the house after all. Use the money to buy myself a place closer to work, somewhere with no painful memories attached. The next day, I met with my therapist, Dr. Martinez. How are you feeling about everything? She asked. You know what's weird? I feel guilty about not feeling guilty. Does that make sense? She smiled. Perfect sense. You've spent your whole life being programmed to feel responsible for your mother and sister's happiness. It's natural to feel strange when you finally break free of that programming. I keep waiting for the regret to hit. For that voice in my head that says I'm a terrible daughter, a horrible sister. And it's not coming. All I feel is relief. Peace. Like I can finally breathe. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's because you've done nothing wrong. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Refusing to be manipulated isn't selfish. You're not responsible for the consequences of their actions. As I left her office, my phone rang again. Another unknown number. This time, it was Emma. "Tracy," she was crying. "Please, I messed up. Jake left me, I have nowhere to go." I stood there on the sidewalk, listening to her sob. 6 months ago, I would have caved. Would have offered money, help, support. Would have let myself be guilt back into the old patterns. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry you're having a hard time, Emma. I hope you figure things out, goodbye." Then I hung up, blocked the number, and walked to my car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that's not always a good thing. Sometimes blood ties can drown you if you let them. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to let go. I started my car and headed home. Not to the house where I grew up, not to the past, but to my apartment, to my future, to a life where I finally put myself first.